Hey, what's going on, OCs? Welcome to episode 84 of an ongoing series where we basically take the camera anywhere we want and we try to find secrets and new discoveries to some of our favorite games. First, I want to give a huge thank you to Channy and Kimberly for doing this week's animated intro. They have their own YouTube channel with lots of great animations that I'll show you at the end of this episode. And of course, I got to give a humongous thank you to Codename Gamma. This is the man who made the camera itself, as well as helped out with the show in the past, so make sure you check out a link to his video after you're done with this one. But with that all out of the way, let's get started on a very awesome episode. Kicking it off with the first stage here, and it becomes a challenge to decide what to show you for an episode like this because there's so many restricted camera angles in a Sonic game usually, but I'll try to show you guys as many examples as I can, like here with Green Hill Zone. You do get to see a lot of environment before the rest of it's culled out, and the way it works here in Sonic Forces is depending on the character position is what determines what area of the map is culled out. Lots of games like to use something called occlusion culling, which disables the rendering of environments depending on what the camera is pointed at, but since it's Sonic and the camera is controlled pretty much at all times, the culling works in chunks. And since we're here at the first stage, let's take a look at this sandworm. Lots of weird things going on with this guy. I would have imagined that the worm was just one solid object, but the developers went in a different direction here. A lot of the parts of the body of the worm that don't have the face attached to it turn into donuts, whereas the parts with the face seem to abruptly end. Just like Sonic Generations, it seems as though that when a character starts a stage, there's a little bit of extra stage that's used for a cutscene, if you can even call it that. But since you can never spin the camera to see what's going on, I have to check for myself. And unlike Sonic Generations, which I will link to down below, there's a lot less to see outside of the starting zones in Sonic Forces. It seems that developers have kind of smartened up a little bit and didn't waste too much time with some additional environments. Though if we were to take the camera below the ocean or pool of chemicals, I'm not sure what they were trying to go for here, you can see a large portion of the skybox completely unused. And also we have a viewer request. As always, you can follow me on there to find out what episode I'm doing next, as well as offer suggestions for what I should look at, or send me OC Says fan art if you choose. Anyways, they wanted me to take a look at the launching area for all these airships. And it is very massive and detailed, though it should be noted that they were able to pull this off pretty effectively by reusing a lot of assets that were already made for this area. Most of what you're looking at here are identical versions of the same ship. This one goes out to all the keyboard warriors out there. We got something kind of special that I missed in the Sonic Generations episode. When Classic Sonic completes a stage, he runs past a signpost that goes from Dr. Robotnik to a Classic Sonic that springs out of the sign. Now you might have been able to deduce this yourself, but both the front and back of the sign are made up of 3D models, just squished into the sign. And so if we were to look at Classic Sonic come out of the sign from another angle, it looks very interesting. Also, this is a great opportunity to show you what happens when you do complete a stage. As you know, you see your character on a results screen doing a pose. But did you know that that character model is not the same character model you use to complete the stage with? In fact, both character models can exist in the same plane of existence at any given time. Like for example here with Classic Sonic. And also it's fun to point out that a lot more of the stage can be rendered at once when you're playing as Classic Sonic. Like with the stage that you've been looking at this whole time in this segment, nearly the entire stage can be shown in one shot. So you might notice from the thumbnail that Eggman looks like Gru from Despicable Me. And the reason for this is because it was taken from a screenshot at a very specific angle in the game. At the end of chapter 24, if you take the camera over in front of Eggman, very specific angles of the camera will make his mustache disappear. As far as I can tell, this doesn't happen anywhere else in the game. It only seems to happen on this one chapter. Speaking of this chapter, let's take a look at some other things as well. Like the environment itself has a lot of indoor areas that you're not really given a good chance to look at, especially the ones that are way off in the background. But in many of these cases, they're fully furnished, and most of these rooms are completely unique to themselves. Also, a cutscene that happens in this area is absolutely delightful. I love it. Off camera, you can see the OC character standing on top of the roof until he's supposed to be called in to help Sonic. And as the cutscene continues, the characters that are used in the scene are stored in various places depending on what's going on. Sometimes characters are stored well above the map, sometimes they're stored well inside the building. That seems to be the preferred case, as you'll find most of the characters by the end of the cutscene all seem to chill around the same spot. So next up, we're going to talk about Luminess Forest. And as for the environment itself, these luminous buildings seem to be really interesting. You take the camera around back to one of these and you can see that the back end of the building is fully modeled as well. And of course, anyone who's played this game before knows that there's a giant snake that happens at some point in this level. And if we manipulate the camera during this scene, you can see that the snake is not fully modeled. Though there isn't any reason why it ever should be, because the developers cleverly made sure to point the camera at different angles that did not allow you to see the entire body of the snake. Now, of course, a lot of people were asking me about Infinite and what does his face look like. Unfortunately, on Boundary Break, there's nothing I can really do in-game. Taking the camera through Infinite's masks just shows that at best, you can find additional texture to his eyeball that's exposed, but that's it. However, Codename Gamma brought it to my attention that apparently on the Japanese website, the black bars that are at the top and bottom of the screens are not there for these cutscenes. And so a black bar that's supposed to cut off Infinite's face during this one with Shadow ends up showing what his face actually would look like. So in a small way, that's a boundary break. I just didn't have to do anything to make that happen. Now we got this boss fight with Eggman, and this is a classic Sonic boss battle fight, so everything is 2.5D. One of the most unusual things that I can't really explain for you is way above the character model for Dr. Robotnik and his flying machine is a second glass windshield. Now you might speculate that maybe it's used for his second form or something, but no, doesn't seem to be used for that either. And speaking of that second form, if we take the camera behind the stage, we can see that exact moment in which the second form is spawned. We can also see how far away Eggman goes when he starts flying away. Back at Green Hill Zone with these giant enemy crabs, I wanted to show you something that I thought to be a little bit unusual. Now the game goes through the trouble of showing you the crab getting into position to drop its legs down on you into the foreground, but for no other reason than what I can imagine is the wrong width and length of the legs, or the rest of the body causing some sort of obstruction on the screen. The legs are completely detached from these crabs themselves. It's all just an illusion, folks. No, instead the two seem to coexist while the legs offer up the gameplay aspect. Also, here's a cool little fact to share with all your friends. All the springboards in Sonic Forces have a spike at the end of it. So even in aspects like this where the springboard just shows you the spring and the board, underneath the environment you can find the rest of the springboard at any given time. Thanks to Codename Gamma, we're able to look at an area that was only meant to be in a pre-rendered cutscene. What you're looking at right now is the lab area that Dr. Robotnik is supposed to be monologuing in, except in real time. So now we can manipulate the camera any way we want and take a much closer look at some of these objects that were only meant to be seen at certain angles. In the final boss battle, something really strange happened. Now, what's really cool is that if you zoom the camera out, you can see these cubes that make up that effect that plays out during the final battle. But as we draw the camera further and further out, you can see that it's supposed to be a starry space-themed skybox. And then outside of that skybox is another skybox. But what takes this whole thing into a turn for the uncanny is if we keep zooming the camera out, eventually the skybox on that space theme just turns into a completely different skybox. And the ending to Sonic Forces is pretty great in itself. If we were to remove all dynamic camera angles, you can see characters off screen doing weird contortions to their bodies. This happens to almost every single character in the cutscene, so feel free to take your pick on which goofy pose you want. After which there's supposed to be a scene with Sonic. So since the Sonic model has to be used at a certain point, they stored the Sonic model underneath this set piece. And then once it switches to that scene where you do meet Sonic, all the characters that you were just interacting with in that last scene are now underneath the stage in the new scene. And although it seems like Sonic's just running off into the city. After your character leaves the scene, Sonic just sort of teleports right back to the scene that he started at. Guys, first of all, I want to say a big thank you to Codename Gamma. You definitely want to check out his video if you want to do this for yourself. As always, there's a link to that video down below. And here's a little teeny tiny preview in the little corner here of one of Channy and Kimberly's other animations. Again, I am absolutely in love with their channel. I definitely recommend you give it a shot. Got lots of stuff for Nintendo fans over there. And of course, if somehow you missed out on this channel and you haven't seen all the 500 other Sonic videos that I've done at this point, I'll leave a link to the best ones down below. And of course, I got to do Sonic Generations and throw that on the screen right here, so that makes it an easy click for you if you want that. But with that all said, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again. Take care.